Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. First off, thank you for visiting my channel, and I appreciate you watching the video. If you would, before you leave, make sure to hit the like button down below. That helps me out a great deal. If you like what you find here, check out some other videos and maybe subscribe to my channel. I'm putting out several videos a week, and I think they're useful and entertaining. So today's project, I thought I'd make kind of a contemporary looking ring with a texture on the surface that has a synthetic emerald, little oval synthetic emerald bezel set. And the configuration of the ring I like on this one. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it yet, but we'll come up with a title for this style of ring. So let me show you how to do that today. So first off, here's the little synthetic emerald that I got. One of the things people ask me a lot is how do you tell the difference between a synthetic stone and a natural stone. Emeralds are pretty easy. I checked the hardness of this one just to make sure it was actually a synthetic emerald, and it's harder than glass, so it probably is. It looks like a synthetic emerald. The big difference between natural ones and synthetic ones is that natural ones tend to have a lot of inclusions inside of the stone. So if you look at this under magnification, you'll see that there's not really any kind of internal stuff in there. So emeralds have a lot of times have big black spots and things like that in them. So if you found a natural emerald that was as clear as this one, it would be worth quite a bit. So, but we're going to make a bezel for this. That'll be our first step, probably. Bezel we use is going to be 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip is what I use for generally almost everything. To create the step in the bezel for the faceted stone, I'm going to use a couple of little rings made out of 18 gauge round silver wire. For the band, I'm going to use some 18 gauge sterling silver sheet, and we'll run it through the rolling mill with a pattern. You can buy these various kinds of sheet patterns that you put them through with a piece of silver in the rolling mill, and it presses the pattern into the silver. So it makes kind of a cool way to put some texture into your designs. And that's pretty much all I need for this one. So let's start with the bezel and get going on that. Clean up the end of this a little bit. Flux. If you ever have trouble with soldering, one of the big things that people don't do is flux well enough. If it's not crusty, you want to make sure to give it another little bit of flux to make sure it's nice and crusty, because that prevents the oxidation from happening while you're soldering things. And if you don't do it, sometimes you have problems getting it to do what you want it to do. Okay, I'll spend a little time shaping this into an oval. They make little mandrels for doing this step, which you can get, and there's nothing wrong with using those. I've just done it this way for so long that I've gotten pretty quick at reshaping them into the shape of the stone. Size-wise, I'm a little snug here, but I'd rather be snug than too loose. I'll show you a little trick you can do if your bezel comes out to be a little bit snug. If you put the bezel on your outside of your needle nose pliers like this, you can actually hold it and stretch it just a skosh. Yep. Flip it over and do it the other way, so you don't get it taper too much in one direction. And then reshape it. And that'll stretch it just a little bit. It also work hardens it a little bit, so it's going to be a little stiffer. That fits a little better. Now we need to make this little step for the stone to sit on. I'm just going to make 2 rings of 18 gauge round wire. To create a platform. A little bit too big still. One down. It's important to make sure these guys are flat. So if they're not, that'll come back to bite you later. Put one in. I usually put the best fitting one in the bottom so that we have a seamless bottom. So got one on top of the other. I'm going to push down from the top. Make sure the top one is sitting flat on top of the bottom one. I'll put 3 or 4 pieces of solder on the pad. And then I'm going to set the bezel right on top of the solder and then heat it from above, and it should just draw it right up in there. It's slick. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and file the bottom flat. So you can see I filed it to a nice smooth surface there. And now we need to switch over to the band. Set this to the side for the moment. And I need to decide how big a ring I'm going to make. So this is probably about how wide it's going to be, maybe a little bit wider than this. But we can play it by ear. So this ring is basically going to go kind of like this. This will be shorter than that, but the bezel is going to fit right in like that on top of that, and these are not going to connect though. So it'll be easier to understand once I actually make this. But when I measure for it, since part of it's going to stick out above, it's not going to be a complete circle. Let's say I want to make a 8. Let's do 8.5, just for giggles. So I'm going to measure on the 8.5, but I'm hoping you can see this. But the ring is going to be situated like that. So I'm going to need some extra length up here. So I'm going to go ahead and add about 3/4 of an inch beyond where they meet. And that's just an estimate. I cut that very straight, did I? We'll use that as a length guide for measuring. But when I roll this through the rolling mill, it's going to stretch it out a little bit anyway, so we may trim it down. But I want to make sure I have enough. And I'm going to go a little bit wider than that. So I'll measure from the edge here to there. Let's see how wide that is. I'm going to trim this off and file it a little bit so it's a little nicer. Actually, you know what? I'm not even going to bother because I'm going to probably stretch that out when I run this through the rolling mill. So let's do that next. And we'll get a pattern on one side of this, and then we'll trim it off to the size we need. So hold on for a sec. This is a rolling mill. It's kind of a cheap one, but it works well enough for what we're doing here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this on top of that sheet like this sheet of patterned, this brass pattern sheet, and then I'm going to roll it through there and impress that pattern there. You got to kind of figure out how thick it needs to be though. And this top thing adjusts up or down. Usually the trick is to get it in there so it's snug, and then tighten it down. All right, that feels pretty snug. Just roll it right through there. See, it just puts that pattern right in there. Now we'll just have to straighten it a little bit and cut it again, and then we'll get it to the right size. First off, this caused a little bit of a curve, which probably means my wheels are not perfectly parallel over there, so it caused it to bend or get squished a little slightly more on one side than the other. But I'm going to tap that a little bit on the steel plate, and I'm not going to do that on camera. So. And I'm going to try and get this perfectly flat this way. Getting pretty straight there. This curved side is the side that I cut out with the rough cutters, so I'm going to scribe a new line about the same width as before, which was 7/16, if I remember right. I can probably get by with using these ones now since it's a little bit thinner. Better. Okay, that looks pretty decent. Now let's get back to our original length here. See how much longer it is now? That's just from squishing it through the rolling mill. It kind of presses it that way and this way a little bit. So, I'm going to cut it off about this length. Well, actually, I'm going to leave it a little bit longer than I originally had it, just because it leaves you some room for fudging, you know. So, I'm just going to take the end off here. Let's get one end really flat. Okay, so this will be our good end, and this will be the end that sticks up. Before I do this, I'm going to anneal this a little bit so it's easier to get wrapped around the ring mandrel at the size that I want, because running it through the rolling mill has made it quite a bit harder just by work hardening. So when you do this, it softens the metal back up a little bit. Let that cool for a minute. Okay, so I'm going to start small down here, and I'm going to try to get this wrapped around. If you need to get it started, tap this. Down like that. I'm just going to try and roll this. I can get a grip on it. If you flip it over periodically, it'll deal with some of that taper that you get caused by the mandrel being tapered. Each time I push it a little closer to the size I want, I'm bending it down like that. I'm going for 8.5, wasn't I? Like that. Ideally, you'd like it to, when you drop it, to fall loosely to the size you want it to be. That's pretty close. Might need to do a little bit of straightening out there. So this is going to sit right in there. The trick is I can't solder that to the top of the bezel, so I need to solder it in kind of like that. But that tells me that it gives me an idea how long I need to cut this off. So to do this, I want it to be at an angle there, but I can't have that soldered to the top of the bezel, otherwise I won't be able to bend the bezel over the top of the stone. I don't know if you can see that, I hope so. So I need to cut this so it's going to be shorter than where the top of the bezel is. So when I look at it, I'm going to go about halfway down the bezel and we'll cut it off about right there. So that would be double check that here. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, so we'll cut it off right about there. Make sure it's pretty straight here. If you're new to this and wondering why this looks kind of coppery, sterling silver is 7.5% copper and 92.5% silver. And sometimes when you heat it, a little bit of the copper oxidizes on the surface and causes what's called fire coat. And that'll polish off, but I can eat most of it away with pickle. And then aggressive polishing will take the rest off. So I think I'm going to go ahead and file the top of this. Smooth it out a bit. Okay, and then I'm going to angle the corners of this so it's not quite as sharp. And when I'm dremeling it, I'll probably do these inside ones too a little bit, but right now to do is we're going to solder this there. So there's solder in the bottom here already, but I'm going to try and pick some in there in case I don't have enough. And if I solder it, there's a lot of ways you could probably do this, and I'm not sure which way I'm going to do it yet, but one way we could start is to just do it like that. But in order to make sure we get enough solder, I think what I'll do is I will sweat a little bit of solder on the side of this bezel here, where the solder joint is. There's probably enough there, but just to be sure, put a little extra there so that when I heat this again, it'll solder down to that point. And maybe even add a little bit to the bottom too. Why not? What's the worst thing that could happen? Okay, there's a bunch of solder, so let's pick a little bit where we need it. I could also pick it in there if I wanted to. Either way, I need to flux that. Okay. Sometimes the hardest part is getting this thing positioned. I'm not 100% sure I have it just how I need it, but I can always adjust it a little bit if it's not where I want it. So let's give it a try. See if we can get it to solder on there. As always, when you're soldering two things together with such disparate mass, most of the heat is going to go on the bigger piece, which is this big piece of sheet that I just textured, versus this little tiny bezel, which will get hot pretty quickly comparatively. Some solder flow, and then we'll see if it's straight or not. I don't know. I guess we'll find out for sure. So it's in about the right spot. However, it's tilted that way a little bit, so I'm going to have to heat it up to the point where the solder flows again and tip it a bit. And that shouldn't be too hard to do. I just need to get it kind of held in place with something. That'll work. I can heat it up again. I'll reflux it just to make sure everything flows. Heat it up to the solder flow point, and then I'll just, while I'm doing that, I'll push a little bit on this to try and get it to straighten out. We'll see how that works. One of the things you get good at after a while of doing this is fixing your own screw-ups. I hope this is in frame and everything. Trick to doing stuff like this is make sure all of the solder joints are flowing again. Otherwise, it's not going to move on you. It's relatively straight. Go with that. Yeah, because both this solder joint and this solder joint had to be liquid in order for that thing to tip. So, well, it looks like we got it pretty straight. So I'm going to go ahead and let this pickle, and then we'll come back. I'll clean it up with a Dremel a bit. I'll set the stone and we'll polish it, and we'll see how it looks. So you can kind of get an idea of what kind of ring this is going to be. We're back. And here's the ring as far as it goes so far. I polished the inside with the Dremel, cleaned up the bezel a little bit. I filed it down to about the level. Actually added a third ring in there just to raise it up a little bit more because of how it was sitting with relation to this thing, this part of the band here that sticks up. You have to have the stone above that so you have some bezel to do it. And I forgot how skinny this stone was, so it sits pretty low in the bezel. So I added an additional ring to raise it up a little further. So let's set this guy. That looks pretty decent. I'll give it a poke from behind. That doesn't fit. Nothing more embarrassing than selling somebody a ring and then having a stone pop out. So I'm going to give it some pressure from behind to make sure it's in there pretty secure. And then that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go polish this, and then I'll bring back the final product, and I'll take a better picture of it for you too and put it at the end. Okay, back from polishing. Here's the final product. I may have gotten a little aggressive on the polishing and removed a little bit of the more pattern than I would have liked, but overall I'm pleased with it, and I think that came out looking pretty. So see, it's got kind of a one side of a scroll work kind of thing is how the design comes out. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that project. Thanks for watching the video. If you wouldn't mind, hit the like button before you leave, and feel free to share this with other people. And I love comments from people, suggestions. Some of the best ideas for videos come from people, so feel free to comment or leave a suggestion. And don't forget to subscribe before you leave. So thanks for watching again, and have a good day. Happy silversmithing. Take care.